So many of you have asked, why am I limping around with a boot on? Come on, people. The answer should be obvious. I broke my ankle wrestling God down by the river one night while on vacation. Actually, I was wrestling with my two young dogs, Barney and Ellie Mae, who dragged me down while hiking when they tried to chase a calf. And the dogs then had the audacity not to bless me afterwards. Can you believe that? But the injury inflicted turned out to be an unexpected blessing, causing me to really slow down, be quiet and still, read, nap, and reflect for the next week of my vacation, a profoundly restorative experience. Like Jacob, I was blessed with a limp that brought about my realignment of body, mind, and spirit with God and renewed my sense of calling. In so many ways, the full arc of Jacob's story in Genesis follows an archetypal pattern of our human journey as God's people. The culmination of Jacob's spiritual awakening comes in this enigmatic passage from Genesis we read today, where Jacob wrestles with this godlike being, walking away, limping but blessed, at last able to reconcile with his estranged brother Esau and become the father of the new nation Israel. Jacob, as you may remember, is the heir of God's promise to his grandfather Abraham and father Isaac. Remember that outrageous, crazy promise God makes? That Abraham's descendants will become a great nation. They will possess land, and they will know everlasting divine blessing and favor. Well, Jacob is wild for God's promise. But there's just one problem. Jacob is the younger child in a culture where the firstborn inherited everything. As a result, Jacob's life is shaped by struggle to obtain God's promise from the get-go. Wrestling his twin brother Esau in the womb, Jacob, the younger son, by mere moments, is born grasping at his brother's heel. Jacob arrives into the world as a scheming, heel-grabbing underdog, seeking to supplant his big brother to claim the divine promise. When older, an ever-shrewd Jacob convinces a ravenous Esau to sell his birthright, his whole inheritance of land and livestock, for a bowl of lentil soup. Then, with his mother's help, Jacob impersonates Esau to steal his blind, dying father Isaac's blessing intended for the firstborn. Upon discovering this deceit, Esau sets out to kill Jacob, having burned his bridges with his family and finding himself a fugitive alone at night in the wilderness. For the first time, God speaks to Jacob in a dream, saying this: "Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Jacob awakes with the epiphany, surely the Lord was in this place and I did not know it. God affirms his promise to Jacob in spite of Jacob's despicable betrayal of his brother and father. But Jacob soon forgets. When he sojourns to his mother's homeland in Haran and meets his match, his cunning uncle Laban, whom he serves in a bitter power struggle for 20 years. By the end of this time in Haran, Jacob, back to his trickster ways, marries both of Laban's daughters, Leah and Rachel, fathers 11 children, and successfully breeds large herds of livestock. As promised, God calls Jacob home to Canaan at last. Yet no sooner does Jacob flee Laban's tyranny and return home with his large entourage of wives, children, servants, and flocks, he must face this brother he wronged, really badly wronged, decades ago. Jacob assumes the worst, terrified that his now powerful brother is coming to exact revenge and kill him at last. After making elaborate preparations to safeguard his family and possessions in anticipation of the inevitable meeting with Esau the next morning, Jacob, for the second time in his life, finds himself alone at night. He is on the other side of the river Jabbok, cut off from his family, full of dread and fear at the prospect of facing his brother. In this vulnerable state, he is suddenly assaulted by a stranger with whom he wrestles all night. Who is this enigmatic adversary, and why does he attack Jacob? Is he a demon, an angel, a divine being of some sort? Is he Esau? Is he Jacob's shadow side, a projected embodiment of all Jacob has wrestled his whole life? Well, maybe all of the above. I think the ambiguity is an invitation to us to wrestle with the text. What is perhaps more relevant is who Jacob believes the stranger to be. Upon surviving the contest, Jacob decisively proclaims, "I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been preserved." Now, this is a really big deal because it was believed that no one could see the face of God and live. Given this, what convinces Jacob that his mysterious adversary is God? The narrator of Genesis tells us, when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket. Now, according to one scholar, struck is a misleading translation of the Hebrew. This verb is more accurately translated touched or barely touched, indicating the stranger possesses some supernatural power to maim Jacob's hip with a precise, light tap. Despite being injured in such a shocking manner, Jacob will not let the man go, realizing this stranger is much more than he seems. So Jacob bellows out, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." In response, after asking Jacob's name, as if to say, "Who do you think you are?" Because of course he knows who he is. The stranger gives Jacob a new name. "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans, and you have prevailed." When Jacob asked the stranger for a name, he merely says, "Why is it you ask my name?" And then he blesses Jacob. This stranger has the power to permanently disable Jacob, grant him a new identity, and bestow the blessing Jacob has desired with such zeal his entire life. For Jacob, only seeing the face of God could bring about such a radical transformation in his life. Damaged by his encounter, he can at last truly receive and internalize God's blessing. His life redeemed, made right with God, so that he is finally ready to face his brother. And then in the passage following our reading today, the author of Genesis tells us that the next morning, Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. In this moving reunion, Jacob, now Israel, says to his brother, "For truly to see your face is like seeing the face of God." And he goes on to say, "Please accept my gift that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me and because I have everything I want." The Hebrew word for gift can also be translated as blessing. So Jacob, with his broken, blessed body, forever changed, shares and returns the blessing he now knows never belonged to him, was always given, and was always enough for both of them. So what are we to make of this? Did Jacob really have to wrestle his whole life, first with his brother, then Laban, and finally with this divine stranger, to at last realize God's promise? Must receiving God's blessing in our lives come at the cost of estranged relationships and crippled bodies? While it often feels that way in this world of ours, I don't think that's how God works. Rather, it is we who cannot seem to recognize God present at work in our lives, blessing us from the beginning. Remember, long before this encounter with the divine assailant, God gave his promise to the exiled Jacob running for his life. Jacob was already blessed, but how quickly he forgot and reverted to his scheming ways. Like Jacob, we forget constantly that God has blessed us with favor, love, grace, and mercy all our days. And when we forget, we wrestle. We wrestle mightily. We scheme, we grasp, we struggle, and we suffer. Fundamental to the human experience is our resistance to God's loving kindness and compassion until our backs are against the wall and we are forced to look in the mirror. It is during such crippling experiences of loss, uncertainty, and pain that our eyes are opened to see the truth of our plight and the love and grace that has been waiting for us from before the foundation of the world. The good news, friends, is that God knows this about us. Of course, God knows this about us, and that's why he sends us Jesus to help us never forget that we are blessed, always blessed, amidst the brokenness and chaos of our lives. Jesus embodies in his crucifixion and resurrection the inseparable connection between our human brokenness and divine blessing. Through the cross of Christ, we are assured that nothing, absolutely nothing, can ever revoke, endanger, or take away God's abundant and inexhaustible blessing in the face of the worst we can do or the very worst that can happen to us. Every Sunday, we come, like the crowds in Matthew's account of Jesus' feeding of the multitudes, weary and limping after a long week usually of wrestling, back to the Lord's table, where we receive the blessed and broken body of Christ. And this reminds us that in our brokenness, we are infinitely blessed so that we may go out and go forth to be a blessing to others. So we can again recognize the face of God in ourselves and our neighbors and our enemies, so that we can be reconciled in and through Christ in order to be reconcilers in a world of wrestling, injustice, and strife. Jacob said to Israel, to Jacob, the nation of Israel, and to all of us, know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised for you. I pray that we may all recognize God's presence and blessing here in this place, in ourselves, in our lives, and the world around us, now and forever, through the grace of Jesus Christ.